come together an administrative and operational framework for the smooth implementation of Act 989. As required under the law, the government, through the Ministry of Information, began a roadmap for the implementation of the Act by recruiting and training information officers to assist public institutions perform their functions under the Act. Most public institutions have set up information officers or do have information officers designated to receive and respond to applications for information under the Act. Of course, we have been speaking to a number of you in the past, and you have given us complaints as to the unwillingness on the part of some agencies to provide information for you. We will be happy to hear from you, as I said earlier. Tonight we are engaging two persons who are well versed in this matter. To my immediate left is Madam Elizabeth Asare. Madam Elizabeth Asare is the Deputy Chairperson of the Right to Information Commission. Thank you very much, Madam Elizabeth. We are grateful to have you here. I am honored to be talking to you tonight in this capacity, really. And a lot of people know her to be a veteran journalist as well. We are very grateful. Also with us in the studio is Mr. Yao Sapon Boateng. He's a lawyer. He's the Executive Secretary of the Right to Information Commission. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation here. Let me start the conversation by helping our viewers to put the conversation in proper perspective. Then they can understand the issue. So let's go back to the very beginning. Why did it even become necessary in the first place to start advocating for a right to information bill and then later on for the bill to be passed into law? Let me start with you, Madam Elizabeth.
I think that getting information in the past has been a very difficult issue. And for me, working as a journalist, you go into certain offices for information and they shut the door in your face. But then we know that the information that we need is to feed the public so that they can have a better grasp of what is going on. It is important for transparency. It is transparent. It is important for governance. It is important to help the electorate make up their minds on what they want and what they do not want. So information is a prerequisite to democracy. So everybody needs information to be able to make informed choices and to make up their minds as to how they think that the country should go. And if you're saying that we are a democratic nation and it's a government of the people, for the people, by the people, and the people are not involved in it, then there's a big gap. So information bridges that gap. So it is important for the people to get every information that they need to be able to make up their minds.
And you use the word every. I'll come to that later on. But talking about democracy and its enhancement through information, was it the fact that previously, before the introduction of the Right to Information law, that we lived under a dispensation where information was not forthcoming? But I recall, I mean, under the Fourth Republic, from Jerry Rawlings to Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, there have always been State of the Nation addresses where the President, through Parliament, gives information as to what the state of the nation is to the entire Ghanaians. In respect of how the economy is performing, you have the Finance Minister, by law, required to go to Parliament and give us the budget statements and, you know, all those things. We have a ministry that is committed to entirely to information and its delivery. We have a media network of more than 300 radio stations, 50 channels, TV channels, and hundreds of publications. Were we ever in a situation where you would say there was no information flow?
Well, I want to view it from the legal perspective, that our constitution in 1992 guaranteed us access to information as a fundamental human right. So as under our constitution, we have the right to information, except that the process for getting that kind of information had not been put in place for a very long time. That is why there was the advocacy for the Right to Information Act. And the coming into force of this act has now put a process in place by which people can apply for information without having to give a reason why they want a particular kind of information.
Right.
So what this law has done has actually put a structure in place where you can simply follow a certain process and get information. Now, you do not need to be a Ghanaian under this law to get that information. You do not need to state the reason why you require a particular form of information. So that is the good side of this law that has come. Yes. So yes, governments were under obligation to read a certain state of the nation's address and all to the people, but that is to say, read it and then we scrutinize it. But with this kind of law, we can determine what kind of information we require. Anybody can walk in and request any information without stating why they need that particular information. So we can get it for our own purposes. And an informed society makes a better democracy. So that is what this law is up for.
Before I even get to Madam Elizabeth to explain to me, because she used the word every, let me stay with you a while longer and find out. So we're talking about before and now. Has anything changed?
I think so much has changed.
Really?
Before any public officer will take office, they will swear what would usually be an oath of secrecy. Now, this law has indicated that where any law or any provision of an act requires the production of information, for instance, it is subject to this law. So this law remains supreme over any kind of law that allows secrecy. So you cannot hide under any law for non-disclosure when this law has to prevail. I don't know if you're getting it.
I get you, but I necessarily do not agree with you. And that's where I'll turn my attention once again to Madam Elizabeth. Recently, I mean, even media personalities, we know about City's Caleb issue, where the national security argued that, I mean, the information he sought to record was of such a nature that it didn't have to be published. They were not even, so it means that if the journalist had even applied for that kind of information, it would not have been given to him. You say every information should be given?
When we talk about every information, we're talking about information that is accessible. There is exempt information. And the exempt information is exempt because it could cause all kinds of difficulties or hazards for us as a people. We are sovereign, we need to keep the peace. So if national security says that some of its information is exempt, then it is exempt because it is to protect us. And when I said every, I'm talking about every in terms of accessible information, information that can be given that won't cause any harm, information that you need probably to decide whether you want to build a house in a certain area. If you should go to Exxon Housing, they should be able to give you that information. So when I talk about every, I'm talking about every accessible information that anybody would want. And to add to what Yao said about the law, we know that even in the recent past, information that could easily be given, some public officers would refuse to give because they think that they wield that authority to hold back information, maybe for their personal purpose or things like that. But now you know that it is information that you should be able to access. It is your right to get certain information. And if you go asking for that information, you should get it. If you're refused, you can wait, you can apply to the commission. And if the commission vets what has gone on between you and the public institution and think that it should be given to you, they would state so. And if you think that if the commission should refuse you the information or should refuse that you get that information, you can also go to apply to the High Court, and the court will decide as to whether you get the information or you don't. So there are processes to getting information, but we should be able to access it, and we want everybody to know that accessing information is a right.
I'll stick with you because when you consider the fact that, again, you said in respect of national security, for example, say if they decide that that information is of such a nature that they should not be it should not be given out, then so be it. So you come to GBC and you're looking for information about how we maintain our library, or you come to the Right to Information Commission and you want to know how much salaries have been paid to contract workers, for example, and then the Right to Information Commission says that kind of information for us such a nature that we will not be able to give it to you. GBC says this one we can't give to you. Everyone is allowed to decide what to give out and what not to give out. Then there's a confusion, great one in there. Yes.
Okay, so let me come in here and say that yes, we have exempt information, but institutions in themselves are not exempt from the application of this law. So for instance, you can't say we are Ministry of Defense and therefore this law does not apply to us. No, this law applies to every institution, including the Office of the President, including the Judiciary, including the House of Parliament. Now, the law exempts certain classes of information.
Right.
Generally, the law has stated that statistical information is not exempt. So if, for instance, I go to the Ghana Armed Forces and I require to know how many grenades are imported on yearly basis, it may just be for statistical purposes, and therefore I should be able to get that information. The law is clear on that. But if I want to know what their defense strategy is, then it could likely be exempt because it's a strategy that has not been utilized.
Right.
Yes, then it becomes a challenge. So there's a distinction between what is exempt even at national security level and what can be disclosed.
So for the layperson out there, do we have a clear-cut definition, unambiguous definition of the kind of information that is exempt, so that in the first place, even as journalists, as ordinary citizens looking for information, we will know that this kind of information we should not even apply to have it. So we can't come back and complain of denial of access to information.
Yeah, so section 5 to section 17 of the Right to Information Act actually spells out information that is exempt, to the extent that even some kind of personal information under the control of a third party are exempt from disclosure. So there are several categories of exempt information. If I could just briefly rush you through. You look at information relating to the president or vice president, information relating to cabinet, information relating to law enforcement and public safety, information affecting international relations, information that officers and that affects the security of a state, economic and any other interest, information related to economic and any other interest, economic information of third parties, information relating to tax, internal working information of public institutions. So for instance, you apply to a public institution and the information you require is actually in the process of being utilized. It can be withheld from you. You may be exempt. That information may be exempt because it has not been utilized. It's in the process of being used by the public institution. That information must be withheld until it has been utilized. Then you can have access to it, for instance. Parliamentary privilege, fair trial, contempt of court. Then there's privileged information, client-doctor relationship, client-counsel relationship. Yes. Then there's disclosure of personal matters. So to the extent of that, you can even have disclosure for the protection of matters of public interest. So these categories of information.
So I get the scope now. So Madam Elizabeth, so does that mean that for my cousin who lives in the Y East district, that he can walk to the district assembly and say, I would like to find out how much money came into the district assembly's common fund that was reserved for persons with disability and how that money was dispersed? And is there, because that's for statistics, like you said, lawyer, will the assembly then be mandated to give that kind of information to an ordinary person, such as that my cousin who has no, is not of any standing in society, so to speak.
Yes.
Just an ordinary person.
Yes, the assembly has to give that information. The person doesn't even have to be Ghanaian to be able to access that information. Once the person asks for that information and it's accessible, it's not exempt, then the person must receive the information that they require. So
next question, what has been the response of ordinary Ghanaians, even journalists who are supposed to be working with information? Do you have information about how ordinary Ghanaian citizens and journalists included are making use of this law?
Let me say that currently I would not say that we have that kind of information, but I believe that people are now being aware that the Act is in place and therefore they can access information. Those who know that the Act is in place are beginning to access or are beginning to put their rights into use and asking for certain information. We have had complaints from a couple of people who in the past have asked for information and didn't get any response from the institutions, and therefore people are becoming aware. But we also are planning that we need to do a nationwide tour, education, sensitization, and creating awareness of the Act, so everybody is on the same page, knowing that the Act is in place now and that access to information is a right and that they should be able to use the Act to get whatever information they need.
Earlier, lawyer, you talked about structure, said there is a structure. Not too long ago, I was part of a meeting of journalists who had issues with the right to information law. Manasseh Azuri Awuni, Sisters of CT, Mustafa of the Daily Graphic. In fact, journalists of good standing in this country were all at that meeting. One of the things that came out was that even the structure that you refer to has been structured in such a way that it tends to frustrate the applicant. You agree?
So the law, I disagree. I think that we have moved from a system where there was no structure or no process to a point where we have a right to information law. I think that in as much as we are beginning to use the processes, we should not be frustrated in going through the process to the end. I think most of these journalists, when they start the process and they are frustrated, truncate it in the middle and go to sleep.
Why should I even be frustrated? This was supposed to give us access.
Yes, but
why should I be frustrated the process?
So that we can have some clear use of the law, you must go through the process. You cannot say because
the
you
process
feel
is designed to frustrate.
What may frustrate you may not be frustrating for another person who really needs that information. If you decide that you need some information, the law has laid the process for you. You go through the process to the end. And then be sure when it frustrates you at this point, it cannot frustrate you at the other point. The commission is an open commission, and we are mandated to apply the law as it is. So if you go through the process of requesting and you're not getting what you require, you don't end it there. You should pursue to the end where you can have the commission look at the circumstances that you deem as frustrating, and then we have powers to correct such behaviors of public institutions. We even have the power to levy penalties to public institutions who have in a way structured themselves to frustrate the implementation of the law.
I'll return to
Let me just add, you know, for us journalists, when we go seeking information, we want it hot. So like you go and you expect that you get it the moment you're asking for it. But that is not the way the law works. If you want to access information, you put it in writing, you send it to the institution. They have a period of time to respond to you. That's 14 days. If 14 days elapse and you have not heard from them, then you can come to us. You can go to the head. You can go to the head of the institution. If you go to the information officer and you're not getting the information you require, after 14 days you can appeal to the head of the institution. If after 21 days you do not get an answer, then you come to the commission, and then we will deal with the institution and make sure it gets the information. So it is a process. It is not like you chancing on something, and I know that journalists, because of scoops, we are always wanting information and wanting it quickly. But if you want to access information and access it properly, that is the process you have to go through.
But I also want to add that this law is not for journalists
Alone.
It's for all Ghanaians, especially students who require information to write their project works. You know, we shouldn't limit the discussion to just journalists. Otherwise, we will make the general public run away.
So when I asked my question, I asked from the point of view of the ordinary person.
Yes.
Then I said including journalists. But even before we continue, maybe we have to pause here and talk about the mandate, the remit within which the commission works. What's your mandate?
So the object of the commission, as you read previously, is to promote, protect, monitor, and enforce this law. So everything under this law is within the mandate of the commission to do so. Now the law gives the commission powers to use all means possible to have resolutions and reduce technicality in the application of the law. So as much as possible, as you would get processes in the law court, when you come to the commission, the processes are very limited, and we are not strict on processes. Our focus is on making sure the law gets effectuated.
Well, so again, we're talking about how to access information, but you say as part of your mandate, you are supposed to promote.
Sure.
The promotion really doesn't appear to have happened in the last 2 years, 1.5 years. So we haven't seen you,
like you said,
on a promotion drive.
Yes.
And so a lot of people, like Madam Elizabeth said, are not even aware of the law yet.
So the commission came into office in October 2019, and then we began the process of setting up the structures of a public office, and then you understand the bureaucracies that go with it. So it doesn't happen overnight that you would see the commission on the road, but that notwithstanding, we have done a few public engagements through the media outlets.
Right.
We have been available on so many of your media programs. I think the last time we engaged with journalists was at a launch of guidelines by the Media Foundation for West Africa for journalists to be able to utilize this law. So every opportunity that we get to be able to engage the public on the law, we have taken advantage of. But as it stands now, the Commission's office is fully operational. We've begun receiving complaints from persons who have applied for information, and we have even written some decisions.
But your office is in Accra.
Yes,
it's not Ghana.
So what we have done is that we have also put out an online address that has people from across the country reaching us. So you don't necessarily have to file a complaint in person. You can file it online, and we'll determine it online for you. So but you know, we apply the rules of natural justice. If you complain about someone, we must give them a hearing. Then when we are done with that, we look at the real issues, be able to determine it, and then inform you without getting you to come to Accra. So that's the plan for the initial stages. But going forward, we have plans to establish regional offices, and to the extent that maybe in the long term we'll be doing district offices. But in the meantime, we'll use our digital platforms to reach people across the country.
So your modus operandi itself excludes many Ghanaians from accessing information. You talk about online. Not all Ghanaians are online. Again, with the written applications, there are a lot of Ghanaians who cannot read or write, but they also deserve to be informed.
The law makes it clear that you don't need to write yourself. When you go into a public office to request for information, if you can't speak, if you can't write, you make the application orally. The information officer is obliged under the law to reduce your application into writing and then process it accordingly. So you don't have to be illiterate to be able to gather information. So the law considers the fact that the Ghanaian population is not all literate, and therefore we should be able to deal with even disabled persons who may not be able to hear or are blind. So information must also be kept in the form that they are able to access. Yeah, so the law takes recognition of all these challenges.
Again, Madam Elizabeth, in respect of corporate bodies, institutions that fail to give out information that ordinary citizens ask for, again, it's not every citizen who has the wherewithal to move all the way up to the High Court to seek redress. As part of your monitoring mandate, are you following up to ensure that even where persons don't come to report, that institutions that do not comply are dealt with? Is there a mechanism such as that which can follow and find out those who are not complying?
So at the end of every year, the institutions are supposed to give us a report. And so that report would tell us how many cases they have received, the ones they have rejected, the ones they have answered to. So that is one way of telling. Again, they have to come out with a manual at the end of the year to guidelines, right?
Yes. No, we issue guidelines, which we have submitted to the Ministry of Information, and they would give us a manual. The manual is supposed to contain the information that they have at the various institutions. If you want information from the Ministry of Communications, for example, their manual should be able to tell you what kind of information they have, and therefore you'd be able to access it from them. With that, we'll be able to tell, because if they're not giving us the manuals yearly, then we know that they probably are not carrying out their responsibilities and their duties the way they're supposed to. So that is one way of being able to tell whether they are being whether they're adhering to the laws and what they're supposed to do. That is one way we can tell as a commission. But then you asked about if people do not come and report. If they do not come and report, we would not know that maybe they've gone to seek information and they were not addressed or they did not get answers. So we would encourage everybody who is refused and who has tried to get information to report back to us, so that we would be able to really monitor and evaluate the institutions and how they are carrying out. So in addition to what Madam has just indicated, there is a compliance division of the Commission that does what we call mystery shopping to confirm the processes that have been put in place by public institutions. And by public institutions, I believe GBC is one of such public institutions. So we may just show up and request information just to confirm your processes. And you never know when we are here. And we may not come in person wearing uniforms. So if you're not careful, one of the people making applications are the people going to land you in the position of having to have penalties levied on you. So there is a regime to check that all public institutions are actually complying with the dictates of the law.
Well, I understand that, but you see, and I was happy when, lawyer, you indicated your meeting with journalists through the Media Foundation for West Africa, because, and I also asked a question about the wherewithal that people who do not have the financial muscle to be able to move all the way up to the High Court is what may perhaps prevent them from even making a follow-up. So the Media Foundation for West Africa in particular had an issue with the National Communications Authority when they wanted some information. They were asked to pay some monies and so on. How much money do we have to pay to access information, given the fact that not everybody who needs information necessarily has that money?
Okay, so the law provides a fee regime for applicants who require information. Now, the underlying principle for this charging regime is the reasonability. You are not required to pay for the information per se. You are required to pay for the reproduction of that information. So if I'm requesting information that would have to make you do 20 sheets of photocopy for me, then I'm expecting that I'll be paying for the photocopy of that information, because my request did not generate that information. You have that information already. I'm only requesting a copy of that information. I should therefore not be made to pay for the information, and the law doesn't allow that. what the law allows is that you pay for the reproduction. So if it costs you 20 cedis to get the photocopies, why not? You pay 20 cedis and you are good to go. We are not operating a regime where the information is to be sold for profit. The law is clear. Even in public institutions where you generate any kind of income from this kind of reproduction of information, you are not supposed to mix it with your regular accounts. You're supposed to keep it in a separate bank account for the purpose of RTI matters only. So there's a restriction on even the revenue generated from the reproduction or from the